Thank you, Shraddha, for inviting me here. It's really great to be here at the biggest gathering of entrepreneurs in India, startup entrepreneurs, and it's fantastic. You know, I feel like Rip Van Winkle because about five years back, I went to Delhi to work on some plumbing issues. I worked on this Aadhaar program, and I was not really plugged into what was happening on the startup scene. And I came back a few months back, and I was amazed by the kind of energy, the enthusiasm, the effervescence in the air which was here when I came back. And having lived for 5 years in a fairly cynical setup, to come back and see this complete absence of cynicism and forward-looking energy was really very exhilarating for me. I met a guy who said he has a startup in HSR layout, which is a little close to where I live in Koramangala. And I didn't even know HSR layouts had startups. And then he said there's an entire street of startups. And apparently, if you go on this street and try to get onto the Wi-Fi, you get 6 startup Wi-Fi addresses up on your iPad or whatever. And I said, there's something happening here, something very different, something which is game-changing. So it's really great to be here with all of you, and I hope all of you create many, many huge companies. Let me tell you a little bit about the Infosys story. We began our company in 1981. 1981, India was a very, very different India. This was 10 years before economic reforms. It was the first time that middle-class people with no money were starting a company. Everybody told us not to start a company. My parents, my uncles, my teacher, they said, you're crazy to start a company. Go and join some large corporation, go abroad, live in Edison, New Jersey, and commute to New York, whatever. So there are all kinds of suggestions, and they say, it's crazy for you guys to start a company. But we said, we will, and we started. And the first few years was very, very difficult for us because though India of that time had no capital, it did not really celebrate entrepreneurship. It was all about large companies and multinationals, not about startups. Doing business was very difficult. Getting a phone took 2 years. You couldn't travel abroad without asking permission from the Reserve Bank of India. There was a time when I had to make 2 quick visits to the US for some business, and some clerk in the RBI said, why are you going so often to the US? So that is the kind of India we were in those days, and yet we were able to break out of that. And I think the big break happened in the early 90s, when economic liberalization happened, when telecommunication made it possible to do remote software development, when the tax laws improved to create duty-free software export parks and so on, and all that made it possible for us to really grow. And let me just say a few things that I learned from that experience. The first is think big, because to think big or to think small is the same effort. It takes the same effort to think big or think small, so might as well think big. And that was a big lesson that we learned, because in the first few years, we were growing at a very sort of leisurely pace, 10–15% a year. And by the early 90s, we reached a revenue of about $5–10 million. And then we said, this is not going to work anymore. This whole doing a little bit every year and growing not going to work anymore. And we need to think very differently, because if we didn't think differently, we would be squashed by the competition. And that's when we started having large dreams, saying that we'll reach a revenue of $100 million and $1 billion and $5 billion and all that. And I think nothing changed except our imagination changed, our ability to think big changed. And that's very, very important. I think. You must think big from day one. And that's what actually I find with today's entrepreneurs. When I go and I do meet a lot of young people. I'm amazed by the self-confidence, their ability to think big, the complete awareness of what's happening in the world, the way they are networked into developments, and the supreme self-confidence with which they're doing business. So I'm really delighted that all of you are thinking big in whatever you do. The second thing which I think is very important is, especially when you have a founding team, you must make sure the founding team has complementary skills. Because ultimately, business has many dimensions. There's technology, there's markets, there's finance, there's handling people. There's so many things in understanding strategy, selling to customers, understanding how to do a good product that goes viral. So and all those skills are not necessarily going to be there in one person. And therefore, having a team is very important. But at the same time, I think having a team which believes in a common vision, having a team which believes that in the same values, having a team which you are willing to grow old with is very, very important. When I go back and look at our history, there were many startups around the time that we started, but very few of them made it. And a lot of them didn't make it because the founders couldn't agree. Some people wanted instant rewards. Some people were willing to defer rewards for 10 years. Some people wanted to take out the money from the company and buy fancy cars. But I think being willing to be in a team which has the same set of values, willing to defer gratification for a future date, willing to take personal lifestyle constraints so that you do well in the future, and everybody agreeing to this is very, very important. And everybody agreeing to subordinate their ego to a larger purpose is the key to a sustainable team. So I would urge you to think of making sure that apart from thinking big, you think of having a great team, a great set of co-founders, people whom you can spend the next 5, 10, 15 years with in building a great company. The other thing which we realized is that, when I was younger, I thought innovation will happen only in big companies, because big companies have the resources, they have the R&D, they have the scientists. But actually, I realized as I grew up that actually big companies often don't become the innovation places, because the very constraints of the company actually sometimes inhibit innovation, because somebody comes out with a new idea, that new idea tends to compete with something else which is already working in the same company, and then it gets killed in some way. And therefore, I think the innovation has to come from people like you who are unbounded in your imagination, who are not constrained by past, are not constrained by what cannot happen, because the biggest danger for innovators is people telling you that things won't work. So I think that's another important thing, that innovation will come from small companies like you, and I'm very excited to see the kind of stuff that is happening now. The other important thing which I talked about in going global was building a global brand. Now when, again, please understand that I come from a pre-internet era in some sense, because we didn't have the internet until 1995, and we were already 15 years old by that time. So we had to figure out a way, without spending too much money, to build a global brand. And therefore, building a global brand was about creating a company that was unique, creating a company that was talked about, using viral methods of communicating, using key organizations and key events to spread your message. And I think that's the way to build a brand. And I think building a global brand is something which is, again, very important. The way we did it was very different because the times are different. But today, I think we have a lot more tools at our disposal to build a global brand. And I think your product itself will speak for it as it goes viral. I also believe that we have to look at, as I said, I talked about this whole idea of delayed gratification. And my point is that if you're building a company, and if you're not building to flip it, if you're building it for a sustainable company, then there are 3 or 4 things you must focus on. One is you must think of what you're doing as building an institution. Institution building is not the same as just doing something for a few years. Institution building is about creating a company which will be there forever, or at least you hope it's there forever. And therefore, institution building requires a lot more patience, a lot more hard work, a lot more ability to sort of plan everything for the long haul. The way you treat your people, the way you deal with your investors, the way you deal with customers, everything has to be seen from the perspective of a sustainable way of doing things, so that you create a company for the long haul. It's also about leadership, because the best companies is about the best people. I would rather back a great team with a bad idea than a mediocre team with a good idea, because I can get that great team to finally pivot to a good idea. So that's not a big deal. But the other way around doesn't happen. And therefore, I think if you want to attract the best talent, you must have a very compelling vision and attract talent to work for you. So talent management and getting the sharpest, youngest, smartest people to work for you is very, very critical to building that company. And then, of course, I think mentorship is very important. One of the things we did a lot of was mentoring young people to make sure that they got the skills, because we were going into uncharted territories of building companies, and nobody really had the background that we needed for this. So we had to actually create our own talent and groom people up and make them go forward. And of course, I think being able to sell is very, very important. Of course, nowadays, selling meant taking a plane and flying to North Carolina for one day kind of thing. But today, probably you can sell in a very different way. So I think all these things are very, very important for building a great company. And I believe the time has come for hundreds of companies to become global from India. So I really hope that this TechSparks will be the place for that. Let me spend a couple of minutes on a couple of other things. After I spent 30 years at Infosys, I said, let me try to do something different. And as you know, I went to build this Aadhaar program. And when we designed the Aadhaar program, we designed it to be a platform. we thought about it like the internet or GPS. If you know the history of internet or history of GPS, they were not originally meant for building apps. They were built for military purposes, for communication, for missile guidance, and so forth. But once the technology of the internet was put in the commercial domain, and once the technology of GPS was put in the commercial domain, you now have a multi-trillion-dollar economy which uses these basic platforms. So these basic platforms were built by government, but innovators use them for doing things. So when we built the Aadhaar program, we took the same approach. We said, let's create a platform of digital identity. Now, digital identity is very important, because as we go more and more online, as we do more and more of our transactions online, making sure they're secure, making sure they're encrypted, making sure there's no leakage, making sure there's no privacy violation becomes more and more important. And in other parts of the world, you rely on private companies to provide you a digital identity. But here, for the first time, we have a government program which provides digital identity. And this digital identity is secure, it's authenticatable online using biometrics or OTP or a mobile phone. And it allows you, it's designed as an open platform with a bunch of APIs, which allows you to embed this identity verification in your application. The application could be running on a smartphone or tablet, on the internet, on an Internet of Things tomorrow. It doesn't matter. All the APIs are provided in an open manner. And the reason we did that is that we said in the long term, we want to create an innovation platform. So the early use of this is really a lot of the government applications are getting rolled out. You've been seeing this online attendance system for bureaucrats that has been rolled out. It's being used for cash transfers, so billions of dollars are getting transferred into people's bank accounts using Aadhaar, and so on. But in the long run, we actually want to see innovation on this platform, because we think that all of you using your brains, using your smarts, will come out with new innovative ways of using the Aadhaar platform for creating value for customers and for your investors. And that's what I hope will happen in the coming years. Think about it. The GPS, the Global Positioning System, was designed not for location-based services, not for all these things. It was designed for military applications. It was designed in the height of the Cold War for missiles to be guided properly to hit the target. But sometime around the year 2000, the GPS was put in the private domain, when President Carter said that GPS will be commercially available at the same level of accuracy that you have for military applications. This was the year 2000, barely 14 years back. And in these 14 years, you have a $500 billion economy around GPS. You have maps like Google Maps and other maps. You have self-driving cars. You have inertial navigating systems. You have location-based services. All these simply answer the question of GPS, which is, where am I? Similarly, Aadhaar is also a platform which answers the question, who am I? And we think that who am I available digitally will make a huge difference to the kind of apps that you build in the future. Today, Aadhaar has hit close to 700 million people have an Aadhaar. And by next year, 1 billion people will have an Aadhaar. And therefore, this is the Aadhaar user base has gone faster than WhatsApp, so just for information. So I think this is something, so while I would like you to think about this as you think of your next companies, as you think of apps, think of how you can use the Aadhaar APIs. They're all on the website. You can go check it out. We're already seeing companies coming out. I saw a recent company which got a valuation of about $20 million entirely on an Aadhaar-based app. So I think that it's happening, and I'm sure that all of you will make it happen. So I think let me end now, because I think this is a fantastic event. I'm delighted by what's happening. As I told you, 5 years back, I was out of the system doing some plumbing and all that. I came back and saw this extraordinary energy. My friend Ravi's been telling me about what's happening here. Shailendra's been telling me. Shailendra said that we now finally have college dropouts starting companies. So that's, to me, is a sign that we've arrived, when people are dropping out of college to start companies. So I think this is a great time, and I think today is a fantastic event. I congratulate Shraddha and their team for an amazing job. In 4 short years, they've created this amazing event, and the energy in this room is palpable, and I believe all of you are going to be superstars. Thank you very much.